Short here with Eric Samulski, and we are here to talk some fantasy baseball. Eric's got the beautiful background behind him of our Rotoworld magazines. Our most recent one directly behind him with Shohei Ohtani, last year's with Aaron Judge. We have our online draft guide, which is being constantly updated. And it's a shame there's just like nothing happening in baseball right now.
Right. Just no news.
No news, no trades, nothing. Like, I really don't know what we're going to talk about today, but we're going to try to take your questions. No, seriously, it's been a crazy 24 hours in baseball. So we'll talk through the headlines, but we're also here to talk fantasy drafts. We are in the peak of fantasy baseball draft season. We're going to have games that count 1 week from today. And then the week after that is the more traditional opening day. So, I would say most leagues probably aren't going to count these opening series. It's kind of weird, kind of quirky. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. It's just unique circumstances there. And that series between the Dodgers and the Padres. But the Padres got a lot more interesting yesterday, acquiring Dylan Cease. First off, I was shocked. Were you shocked, Eric?
I was shocked that it was the Padres.
Yeah.
All of the information over like the last 48 hours had been it was a matter of when, not if, Cease would be traded. Obviously, like some of the rumors were the Rangers, and that felt super logical to me.
Yeah.
And so I kind of assumed it'd be the Rangers or maybe the Yankees out of the desperation with Gerrit Cole. I did not expect the Padres. I did not expect the Padres to deal the pitching prospect they got back for Juan Soto. So all of that was super interesting. But you know what? The White Sox were pretty open about like this spring helped Dylan Cease's value. He looked good in the spring. He was missing bats. And so teams upped their offers a little bit, and the White Sox decided to take advantage.
Yeah, very surprising destination for Dylan Cease. I saw you said you don't sense a big difference in terms of value for Cease. I like the ballpark change for him. I know the division context is a little shaky because you got the Dodgers there, you've got trips to Coors Field, etc. I'm moving him up slightly in my rankings, maybe by a few spots, but curious about your case for where he sits after the trade.
Yeah, I moved him up a couple of spots. Nothing really like I said, when I tweeted about it, I said it's nothing meaningfully different, meaning I'm not making any huge adjustments, but even just saying, okay, maybe he wins 3 more games, which actually feels like a pretty moderate adjustment. But let's say he wins 3 more games. That will bump him up. My point is nothing about the ballpark that he pitches in or the team he pitches for really matters in your long-term evaluation of Dylan Cease. It's whether you think he's closer to the 2022 version of himself or the 2023. Do you think he can get the command in check? Do you think that he can stop giving up hard contact? He gave up the most hard contact last year that he has in 3 years. He was not getting called strikes. He had a really high walk rate. So it really just matters of who you think he is as a pitcher in terms of can he get the command in check and use that like really plus raw stuff. If you felt like his command was questionable, then pitching in Petco doesn't do anything to make that better. I mean, yes, like the vibes are better on a better team in Southern California, but
that's for sure.
Yeah, but I don't know if vibes are going to make him throw strikes. So it really just, for me, it depends on what you thought about Cease before this trade. If you were in, obviously that's great. If you were not in, maybe you bump him up a couple of spots because of team context, but I don't think you go crazy.
So first question we'll start off here, and this is another big topic that hit late last night, was Devin Williams. So he's expected to miss around 3 months, has stress fractures in his back. Huge blow for the Brewers, who, we know they're kind of rebuilding, retooling at this point. It hurts them because, you think about the trade deadline, like Williams would be an obvious trade candidate. Now there's questions about that. Maybe he's back in June and, he's healthy and he looks like himself and they can still pull off a trade. But the Brewers bullpen is a strength even without Williams. It's hard to lose someone like him because he's so good, but the Brewers have a knack for finding pitchers. So I think it's kind of wide open in the back end of this bullpen, but Mike asked the question here, who do you like for saves in the Brewers bullpen while Devin Williams is sidelined?
Yeah, I like Trevor McGill, brother of the American Spork himself. I think it's totally a toss-up, as you said. It really could be anybody. A few reasons why I like Trevor McGill. One, I think that like Abner Uribe was really good last year. Smaller sample size. I think that the Brewers are happy using him in different situations. Way outpitched his peripherals, and part of that has to do with like a near 16% walk rate. I just don't know how you put that in the ninth inning. I think that makes it a little risky. There are a few things that I like about McGill, like of the three guys, which is Abner Uribe, Joel Payamps, and Trevor McGill are like the three that are being bandied about. Trevor McGill had the best K- walk ratio, which I really like as a stat. Sure. He had the best strikeout rate. He had the best swinging strike rate. He had the best chase rate, so O-swing rate. So he is the best of the three in terms of getting swings and misses, and kind of adding that dynamic aspect that you really like at the back end of the bullpen. So I think his profile to me fits better as a ninth inning guy than those other two.
Yeah, I think Uribe gets a lot of the attention because of the velocity, the slider, the gifts, all that kind of stuff. But the control is a big question, especially in a ballpark where if you're putting base runners on, that can be a little bit dangerous. So yeah, I would say McGill. Joel Payamps is another one that he really came on last year, kind of really out of nowhere, and was really good in that Brewers bullpen. So I would put those two above Uribe. But like if he can get his control in check, he's a future closer in my mind, but maybe not right now.
Sure.
So yeah, and McGill, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I've gotten some questions like, oh, do they move DL Hall back into the bullpen? And I don't think so. No. Right. I mean, I don't even think that's probably in consideration. I mean, he was the centerpiece of the Corbin Burns trade as a starting pitcher. I know he was great out of the bullpen for the Orioles last year. I just don't see any way in which that becomes a possibility for them.
Yeah. So up next, we have Dave Slick with a question. What will the Orioles infield look like on opening day? It's a really good question.
It's a great question.
At the start of the spring, I didn't really think that Jackson Holliday had a shot to make the team. Maybe he still doesn't, but it feels like it's not like a pipe dream at this point that he could conceivably make the team.
Yeah, I think, the whole point was they were going to give him the opportunity to make the team. They were going to give him the opportunity to like show that he could, handle MLB pitching. If that was truly the case, if they were giving him a legitimate opportunity, hitting 323 with, a home run, 2 steals, and a 957 OPS in the spring, is pretty good in terms of handling MLB pitching. Of course, it is also coming with 12 strikeouts in 10 games. So maybe that's part of the reason that they're like, maybe not. And I think the big thing is also just like how good Kobe Mayo looks, right? Like Kobe Mayo is also a legitimate prospect. Like he gets overshadowed by, Jackson Holliday. But this is a guy who who's like a top 25 prospect in his own right. He's 2 years older than Holliday. He has more upper minors experience. He also is looking really good in spring, swinging and missing way less. You could very easily slot him at third base and Jordan Westburg at second, and let Holliday kind of take some time. For me, I think like the long-term concern is for Jordan Westburg. I just don't know if Jordan Westburg is good enough to hold off both Jackson Holliday and Kobe Mayo. And like, I know they started playing Mayo in left field, but now Colton Cowser looks great. Like, so there are so many guys to get in the lineup that, I still think there has to be a trade at some point down the line because there are too many good hitting prospects on this team.
It's amazing that they got Corbin Burns, and it still feels like they have this huge group of prospects where they just don't have enough room for all of them. So, I obviously what's going on with Kyle Bradish, we'll see what happens. But at some point, you could see the Orioles making a move for another starting pitcher.
Yeah,
for sure. All right. So another question here. This is a Mets-centric question.
You love it.
Do you think our Mets not being good, love that, is leading to Jose Quintana and Luis Severino being undervalued? I mean, I guess I think what's leading to Luis Severino being undervalued is that he was just god awful last season. But he's looked great this spring, and I think the reason that there's reason for optimism with Severino is like last year velocity wasn't the problem. So I put Severino like a clear cut above Quintana, who is fine, and I could see spots where maybe you would use him. But I think Severino is a good end game pick and really any mixed league. Quintana more a waiver wire candidate for me. I would assume you're probably aligned on that.
Yeah, actually, I was just looking the other day because I was thinking about Severino as a really good late round pick. And I saw that at least in Rotowire online championships since March 1st. So these are 12 team drafts in the NFBC format. Luis Severino's ADP over the last 2 weeks is 241. Mm-hmm. So that's way higher than it has been. He was outside of the top 300 for a while. And so I think you're going to see Severino start to creep up. And the interesting thing, as you mentioned, is like he's doing nothing in spring that really makes me more confident because the velocity wasn't an issue last time. It was the slider. He lost a lot of vertical break on the fastball. So it was just more hittable, even though he had the velocity. We don't have that data yet. So it's hard to say just like what his fastball shape looks like. But seeing the velocity to me is the same as last year. I'm still interested in Severino, but I'm not yet ready to say this is the Severino of old. And if he starts going near closer to the 200 range, that might be a little too rich. And I would prefer to take Tyler McGill over Quintana.
I was going to mention McGill too. Yeah.
I feel like there's some upside there. You know what I mean? Like I think, he's still not missing a lot of bats, which is a problem because he revamped his slider and he added the splitter to theoretically be more of a strikeout guy. Yeah. But he's not giving up a lot of hard contact. And he has a spot in that rotation. He's been really good in the past. He's not being drafted high at all. So I like taking late shots on McGill just to see if he can put it together.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I've seen McGill go in some of my like deeper leagues just off the momentum from the spring. So he's not a bad gamble depending on the depth of your league for sure. Question for Perry here. Morning. What round would you start looking at Jackson Chourio, Wyatt Langford in redraft leagues? Last year I was kind of all in on rookies. I was on a podcast the other day for Pitcher List, and I was mentioning in Tout Wars last year, I drafted Jordan Walker because he had third base eligibility. I had Anthony Volpe, and I drafted Grayson Rodriguez. And it worked out fine with Rodriguez in the second half. I was patient with him, but those other two, I really bought into the hype. Not every prospect is going to be an Acuna, Tatis, Michael Harris, etc. Do you think the hype is getting a little out of control, especially in terms of Langford?
So, yeah, as you mentioned, Langford since March 1st in NFBC Rotowire Online Championship. So, again, this are 12-team leagues. There's been 46 drafts since March 1st. His ADP now is 93rd. That is an 8th round pick in 12-team leagues. Jackson Chourio is 119th. Since March 1st, that is a 10th round pick in 12-team leagues. I think at that cost, I'm certainly out on Chourio. I think that, he is somebody who will eventually be really good. I know he signed the long-term deal. He's 20 years old. he put up really great numbers in Double-A, but I think you're probably getting, you would get more speed from him, but I think you're getting more muted like power and batting average.
Yeah.
And I understand, Langford has less minor league experience. He is older at 22 years old. He has just more high level baseball experience. And I like his approach a little bit better right now, meaning I think you could get meaningful power and batting average from him. I was out on Langford because I didn't know if he was going to make the opening day roster at the start of spring. I continue to have some concerns buying in the top 100 because they're not going to just DH him. They've already said that. They want him to continue to play the field. He might DH some, but he's their top prospect. He's 22 years old. They don't want him just sitting on the bench and hitting.
Yeah.
And I know the easy answer people say is, just DH Adolis Garcia. Okay, but he's also one of the stars of your team, so he has to kind of agree to that and want to do that. You're not going to risk the relationship if he doesn't want to DH. And other people have said, we'll just bench Leody Taveras. Well, Leody Taveras is a really good defensive center fielder who, in his age 24 season last year, so he is still young, put up a career best season where he cut down on the strikeout rate for the third year in a row. He had a career high walk rate. He hit 14 home runs, 14 steals, batted .266 while playing elite center field defense. You don't really reward a 25-year-old for doing that by putting him on the bench.
Right.
So I think it is still an interesting dynamic to see how they fit all four outfielders into just 3 spots. And if they can rotate everybody into DH and everybody's fine with that, cool. But I don't think it's a given.
Yeah. It's a fun team, fun lineup there in Texas for sure. Another question from Chad, 2-parter on the White Sox side of the C Steel. Is Thorpe the opening day starter now? And with Kopech being moved to the bullpen, is Garrett Crochet's role as a starter firmly secure? I don't think he's the opening day starter. Strangely enough, I think it's Eric Fetty who's the opening day starter. Which, and the changes that he made, they look fairly legit. I would say, his previous major league experience has not been good. I think his career ERA in the majors is in the 5s, I believe. But made some pitch mix changes. There's a little jump in velocity there as well. I think he's started to gain some momentum as an end game pick as well. I would think he's the opening day starter. But the question about Crochet, do you think he's in this rotation at this point, this ragtag group of starters they have?
I think he's in the rotation before Thorpe is in the rotation. Thankfully, I was doing our MLB blurbs this morning, so I've been consuming a lot of White Sox content. General manager Chris Getz spoke to White Sox reporters this morning. He said that he felt really confident with the in-house options in Chicago, but they were willing to pursue any and all opportunities to boost the rotation. That has included, reportedly, they've already reached out to Michael Lorenzen and to Mike Clevenger, who was in Chicago last year. So it's possible they could bring both of those guys in and they would take the spots, vacated by Cease and Kopech. If they bring one, there's one spot. I do think that spot probably goes to Crochet. I just think, the comments about Drew Thorp from Chris Getz this today were a little cryptic, and he was like, he'll definitely pitch for us in 2024. I know he claims he was close to, he was going to probably be in the Padres rotation. And it's too early to tell if that would be the case in Chicago. We have 2 weeks to see how it unfolds, is basically what he said. But all of that to me is like, here's a guy who hasn't debuted yet, so he's got some service time. There's no reason for them to rush him in a season where they're not competing. Absolutely. If they bring in one of these veterans, I could easily see them holding Thorpe down until, May, June, getting another year out of him, and then letting him pitch in the rotation.
Sure, I totally agree. So Tommy might have missed our Brewers discussion earlier with Williams down, Pants or Abner Uribe. We actually think it's going to be Trevor McGill. So he would be my top choice as well. And a lot of people might not really know about McGill. He had a great year last year. So, if you're in a more casual league, like you could get a really nice late round value there with McGill. And they're not really tipping their hand yet who the closer will be.
For sure.
We're just speculating, but it seems most likely that would be the case. All right, Perry. How long should you wait to draft Gerrit Cole with his recent injury news and buy into the spring training outings for Yamamoto? I believe his ADP is in the 3rd round. So with the Yamamoto thing, like the rough start that he had the other day, like that's one of those things where the box score like doesn't tell the whole story, because that Dodgers infield that day was a total circus. So I wouldn't look into that too much. I'm assuming you agree with that.
Yeah, and even his last start, I mean, everybody's talking about the amount of runs he gave up, but he walked 1 and struck out 7 in like 3 2/3, I think it was. So I care way more about the way the stuff looks. Somebody posted, I saw on Twitter this morning, his spring BABIP is 581, which is stupid. Now it is. I mean, the only other thing I will say to take away from this is like, the Dodgers infield defense doesn't look good, right? Mookie Betts is great, and he can probably do anything, but he's not really a shortstop. Now, he can probably play it. Gavin Lux seems like a mess right now. Muncy is not the paragon of health, and he's not a great defensive player to begin with. So I don't think that this is like alarm bells for Yamamoto. But also, even guys like Glasnow and Bobby Miller, who like pushed 50% ground ball rates last year, it's just something to think about. That like, if this infield defense is really that bad, it may hurt them a little bit, just a little, not like anything crazy. But yeah, I still think Yamamoto is. I have him. I think I have him 11th in my last starting pitcher update, and I feel like that's probably where I'm comfortable with him going. I feel better about guys I've seen do it before, like Logan Webb and Zach Gallen and George Kirby, and even to a certain extent like Max Fried. But I still am in on Yamamoto.
So we have our mock draft broadcast that's premiering tonight, 8 p.m. on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. In that draft, I believe Matthew Poliat took Gerrit Cole somewhere in the 90s. And that was before we knew yesterday. I don't even think the Yankees have fully acknowledged this timeline, like 1 to 2 months and whatever. So he's Gerrit Cole's meeting with Dr. El Latrache in Los Angeles today, I believe. And then we'll hopefully learn a little bit more in the next couple of days. But either way, it seems like it's going to be a little while. Knowing this like timeline that's been thrown out, I think it's going to change pending what we hear after this meeting. But if you had to draft today, do you just avoid Cole entirely? Or like, where is the threshold where you're like, yeah, why not? Like, let's just see where this goes.
I'm avoiding. I have him in my rankings around guys like Kyle Bradish, Kodai Senga, who are all guys where the timeline is kind of like June-ish, roughly, depending on how things progress. I'm a little more concerned about Cole because he's continuing to go for more opinions and more, checkups, which makes me think there could be more going on. But I find it really hard starting pitching is already inherently risky. I find it really hard to roster somebody who I know will be pitching through injury, regardless of, when they're coming back. There was no surgery to clean it up. Nothing is quote unquote fixed. They just like rested enough to feel good.
Right.
If you're in a league with an IL spot, I could see towards the very late rounds of your draft, taking a shot on one of these guys and putting them in the IL spot. But just know that as we've seen in the last week, injuries pile up, and it might only be a couple of weeks before you have other guys who need those IL spots. And are you really going to hold, those guys for 2 months on your IL spot? I'd rather not, but again, depends on your league size and everything.
Yeah. So in our little private chat here, you mentioned Adam Duvall signed with the Braves. I saw that on Twitter a few minutes ago as well. I believe this is Adam Duvall's third tour of duty with the Braves.
Yeah.
Great guy, first of all, I should say. Underrated slugger as well. But it seems like he's probably going to platoon with Jarred Kelenic in that Braves outfield, which is interesting.
Yeah, the Braves beat writers have directly said so. So Mark Bowman, who covers the Braves for MLB.com, said the Braves have told Kelenic he will platoon with Duvall. What's interesting to me is that before spring training started, the Braves were adamant that Kelenic would not platoon. They wanted to see him as an everyday player. Yeah. Well, through 11 spring games, Kelenic is hitting .067. That's 2 for 30. He hasn't really struck out a lot, but I guess they're not impressed. And now he's going to platoon. And I just, listen, he's 24 years old. You don't want to write somebody off. He hasn't had continued success at the MLB level. We're talking about Kelenic here, not Duvall. A team that expressed faith in him as an everyday player just now told him he's no longer an everyday player about 2 months later. It's hard to have confidence in that.
Right. But one thing I can assure you, he will mash against the Mets. Just
100%. Yes, 100%. Pick him up when they play the Mets. And that's about it.
Yeah. Question from Tommy here. You'll like this one. Your opinion on Tristan Casas. Does he elevate to elite level this season given his monster second half in 2020?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, listen, I think like yes and done. What is elite, right? You know what I mean? Like I think that there are some questions about, like, first of all, he's not going to steal. So if you're talking about fantasy in general, he's 4 categories max, right? He is showing off a lot of power. He's showing off power against lefties. I think people are assuming he's going to platoon because he platooned a little bit last year. He was a rookie. The Red Sox were easing him in a little bit. I think he is going to play pretty much every day. He's been hitting 4th pretty much every time that he's in the lineup for the Red Sox. So I think he's going to hit 4th now after hitting like 6th and even 7th sometimes. Maybe against lefties, he hits 6th or 7th. And so, I think what we saw in the second half from him is very real. He was that type of prospect. I think that, he is not a dead pull guy because he doesn't need to be with his power, but you may not see him hit 35 or 40 home runs because he may use all fields so that he can push a 270 plus batting average. But I still think he's not being drafted high enough. And if you wait and take him as your first baseman, I think you'll be really happy in drafts. He's going pick 87 in 12-team leagues over the last 2 weeks. And in on-base percentage formats, I mean, he's a top 50 pick for me because his OBP is tremendous.
Yep. Really good to see him start to put it together. I mean, just had the prospect pedigree, the power and the patience in the minors. I love obviously the ballpark for him. I'm a big fan going into drafts this year as well. Chad with another question here. I'm really wondering what you think of Tyler Alexander. So interesting guy because he doesn't most of the time he doesn't even throw 90 miles an hour. It's it's a change up. His 4-seamer is 89, 90. I don't know, with the Taj Bradley injury, do they put Tyler Alexander in the rotation for any short period of time? Thoughts on Alexander and the Rays Magic pitching lab?
Yeah. So I actually think, and I had a conversation with some Rays writers on Twitter the other day because I looked at Fangraph's spring stats, and apparently they are missing a start for Jacob Lopez, who is also in consideration for the final roster spot now. And it's significant because his third spring start for Lopez was much, much better than his first two. And so his spring numbers are actually pretty good. This is a guy who had a 2.72 ERA in 18 starts at AAA for Tampa last year, which is better than what Taz Bradley did at AAA last year. He was 25 last year, 26 this year. So he's not a prospect, quote unquote, but he still is young enough. He had a 26% strikeout rate in AAA last year. He had a 42% strikeout rate in his 30 AA innings. He doesn't bring like overwhelming stuff. He's 91 from the left side, but he has a deep arsenal of pitches. And there are enough people that cover the Rays that seem to think he has the inside track that I'm not going to argue against that. Now, would I take gambles in drafts? No, probably not, unless I'm in like a really deep league. Like I may, for example, we have like I have AL Tout Wars coming up this weekend, right? In that AL only format, I may take a $1 flyer on him. Sure. Because if he actually is a good pitcher and he gets a shot to be in the rotation at the start of the year, maybe he then sticks, or maybe he moves to a multi-inning bullpen spot, whatever. But I think the Rays are always going to mix and match some guys, and we know that they say Bradley is going to come back and it's going to be his job, and we know other guys are coming back over the summer. So I don't think this is like a long-term gig, whoever wins it.
Yeah. Question from Eric, and we're going to have to wrap it up in a few minutes, but we'll try to get to a couple more here. Eric with a question. In Roto today, if either of you had the fourth pick in a 13-teamer, you would take blank and why? Ask for a friend, myself. Okay. So I would think chances are that Bobby Witt Jr. will be there in that spot. Mookie Betts. So if you want the versatility, go with Betts. But I would probably take Witt on the upside and the speed. What about you?
When you say Witt, are you assuming now that Strider is going within the first three picks?
That's an interesting point. I really think you could justify, and we saw this the other day. Actually, I'm not going to spoil anything, but like Strider is a totally defensible number 2 overall pick to me right now. I think the gap between Strider and everyone else is so vast at this point, or not vast, but it's considerable that you could justify him being the number 2 pick. But we kind of know how things are going to play out early in a draft as far as Julio and Corbin Carroll. I think Witt is 4th in that group, so it kind of depends on if someone's super aggressive on Strider.
So this is where you and I differ, and everybody should watch the Rotoworld mock draft because I talked about Corbin Carroll there. I have some concerns about Corbin Carroll's shoulder, that it was surgically repaired. He hurt it twice at the end of last year, but did nothing about it in the offseason. They don't know if it's going to be a lingering issue. If Bobby Witt's there at 4, I'm taking Bobby Witt all day, every day. If it's a choice between Corbin Carroll and Mookie Betts at 4, I'm probably taking Mookie Betts. I know I'm not getting the speed upside from Corbin Carroll, but I'm getting probably better production in the 4 other categories and like the league leader in runs. And I think that we sometimes forget like the value of runs, and I'm getting the best run scorer in baseball who's going to be second base, shortstop, outfield eligible, which gives me just so much freedom to build the rest of my team any way I want. Because I just take whatever value falls to me and then I slide bets at whatever position I need to.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, you can think about is for years, you're thinking first round, second round, you want to get that like 5-tool fantasy player. You want to get the speed. I feel like you don't necessarily have to do that early because speed is dispersed a bit more now under these new rules.
Yeah, I think you have to get some speed. But like Mookie Betts will steal between 10 and 15 bases, and I'm fine with that. I don't know that I need 40 out of my pick. As long as I'm getting somebody who's doing something in the speed category in the first round, then I feel good about that because I'll be able to make up, like I won't be able to make up the gap from Acuna to Betts in one player, but
Mhm.
I can make up some of that ground with other picks without having to like take an Esteury Ruiz speed only type of player.
Yeah, I mean, I think the new rules has kind of elevated a little bit where, I mean, like Lindor stole 30 bases last year, which nobody would have saw
Right.
coming, but like I think that's a lesson where you could see a player maybe would steal 10, 15, suddenly steal 20, and if you collect a few of those guys, you're competing and you're still going to be in the mix.
Mhm.
Let's see, what time for maybe one or two more. Let's do this one here from Paul. He does not like second base this year. He's picking at 10 in a 10 team points head-to-head points league. Obviously not reaching first or second turn, and don't like who potentially be left at the third and fourth turn. Who do you guys draft in the middle rounds at second base? Um I love Glaber Torres. I feel like
Oh, for sure.
I feel like he doesn't get enough respect. Maybe it's like, he had that huge power season where he hit like 15 home runs against the Orioles. And like,
Right.
we kind of like set this idea in our head that, hey, he's like this 30 homer guy every year. Like, that's not his game, but his quality of contact did improve last year. He gives you a little bit of speed. You like the ballpark. You think the lineup will be better this year. He's kind of one of those guys where maybe he says a 10-team league. So he'll be there after, your fourth turn for
Yeah.
sure. He'd be a mid-round target for me.
Yeah, I find myself I like second base more than other people do.
Yeah.
I think that, you got guys like Glaber Torres and Matt McLain who are kind of the end of like they can help you in 5 categories.
Mm-hmm.
And then and also to a certain extent, Zach Geloff. Like, I don't think he's going to have the batting average that Glaber and McLain do, and obviously his counting stats will be lower because the A's aren't good, but he will do a little bit of everything. And then
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a solid crop of guys where it just depends on your build. Like, if you need power, I think Nolan Gorman is a great choice at second base.
Yep.
If you need batting average, I think Edward Julian is a great choice at second base. If you want speed, I think Andres Jimenez is a great choice at second base.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tyro Estrada is a really great choice at second
Agree.
base. I think Ketel Marte, I know he doesn't run. So if you're okay on speed, I think he's, perennially underrated. Brandon Drury, Ryan McMahon, like these are guys who they're boring, but they're going to put up like pretty consistently solid numbers. And then Jorge Polanco in Seattle. I mean, with the question with him is health, but I think he's going to put up good numbers too. So I think there's a lot of options. I think depends on just what category you're safest at, and then maybe get somebody who doesn't produce there.
Yeah, I'll mention Bryson Stott too. So like if you went
Yeah.
if you went power heavy in the beginning of your draft and you needed some speed, like he's going I want to say around pick 100, maybe a little bit later in drafts right now. I think he's a great fill at
What
second base.
112 I'm seeing 112. So
Yeah, so I like him a lot too. I think second base, like you said, I think it's a little deeper, and I really like middle infield, corner infield. I think there's really good options there for power, and typically you want to get speed from those middle infielder positions, and it's there late too with some rookies and young players. So you should still feel pretty good late in your draft to get a middle infielder and a corner infielder. I think we're pretty much out of time here, Eric, but one more plug for our mock draft broadcast tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern time. We brought together Rotoworld writers, our friends at Yahoo, some other folks from across the industry. It's a really fun draft. Ahmed Fareed hosted the draft, which was great to have him involved once again. Really good show, sharp room of drafters. It was taped before we learned about Devin Williams. We should mention that. We knew Gerrit Cole was going to be sidelined, but I still think the context is important. We discuss, where he went and the risk involved in Gerrit Cole. So really good show. Hope you guys check it out. Hopefully, it can be evergreen over the course of your drafts in the coming days. This was fun, Eric.
It was fun. I'm excited to get back into these more regularly as the season goes on.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. And you can always find us on Twitter. I'm at DJ Short. And actually, you could see Eric is at Samsky NYC. All right, everyone. Take care. Have a great day. Good luck on your drafts.
See ya.